Hello and welcome to another Spoilercast done by the Cutie Art Crusaders for My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 5, Episode 23, The Hooffields and McColts. My name is FlutterGuy317, and today I am joined by Rainbow Plasma.
I am impressed that you managed to get that first time, because I feel like I feel like every single time I've thought it in my head, I've messed up. So the fact that you could put it into words, that was pretty good.
Oh, thank you.
That was pretty good.
Years of practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the early morning edition of the Spoilercast.
Mm-hmm.
This is the earliest we've ever recorded. It is 9:50 on a Sunday.
Yeah, I haven't had my coffee yet, even.
Yeah,
So.
but we need to talk about the episode that happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was an interesting one. From what I could hear, from what I heard through the grapevine, you didn't actually like it.
Yeah, I wasn't that happy with it, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I feel differently. We talked last week about how much we didn't like last week's episode, and I looked at this one and I was like, okay, we're back on track.
Yeah. I feel like this one had a lot more awesome qualities to it. Like, I enjoyed the...
It had something good in it.
Yeah, I enjoyed the premise of, these two warring families that, like, has started with, like, one petty disagreement and then kind of spiraled into this, like, family feud kind of thing.
Right. Well, why don't we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that was one of the big surprise strengths of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incredibly tropey to have two sides fight each other, and then the third party main characters come in and try and like solve that problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's one of the oldest storylines ever, right?
Yeah.
In terms of kids TV shows. So, what I was impressed with was that the most common one, the actual trope is that like two people or a number of people walk into these situations and then they both split off into the two groups because they agree with they start fighting as well.
Right, which we saw in the Appaloosa episode where Rainbow Dash kind of took the sides of the buffalo and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that before, and that's the most common one. And then eventually they all, both sides, including the characters that split off, all resolve their difficulties. And so that was what I was kind of expecting, and I was kind of, like, ugh, okay, like I've seen this story a lot. Yes, it's with ponies, and that'll make it enjoyable, but I've seen that before. And what I was impressed with was this wasn't that at all. It was very different from that. So I was impressed, and I was pleasantly surprised that they didn't go down the easy road there.
Yeah. I mean, and I like kind of the whole backstory. I love like when we get snippets of the past in this show, whether it's like big overarching storylines like the whole Luna thing, Nightmare Moon thing, or even just in this episode where it's like it goes back in time and kind of like shows in a way like what led up to this situation.
Right.
I did enjoy Fluttershy's part in this. She was adorably cute and,
it was an interesting one because it wasn't very, again, it wasn't very predictable, her part, right? Like none of it you could look at and be like, yeah, I see where this is going, like they did a really good job of playing down her role in such a way that it didn't make it look like it was foreshadowing anything, right?
Yeah.
Like when she was going around and saving all the animals, to me that didn't say anything to do with foreshadowing the animals having a part in solving the conflict. So yeah, I was really impressive. I was kind of curious how they were using Fluttershy in this episode, again, because I didn't get that sense of foreshadowing, but they ended up doing a really great job with it.
Yeah. I mean, like, her being there didn't seem to make much sense until like kind of the very end, really.
Right, and then it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah, and I think it was a good choice to have these characters go out and do it, because we've seen the Applejack and Rainbow Dash one where they fight, right, and like they start taking the roles, whereas Fluttershy is not a confrontational character. So it's nice to see her in that kind of role, because that happens sometimes. Like, what do you do if you're this non-confrontational character? What do you do when these two aggressive sides are fighting and you're not an aggressive person, you're not a confrontational person? So that, I think it was a good idea to have her, and they pulled it around in the end to make me go, oh yeah, wow, that was really good.
Yeah. And then it all of a sudden made sense that she was there.
Right, which I think is a sign of a well-written story. It kind of keeps your suspension of disbelief alive and kind of keeps you asking questions until the end when they wrap it up.
Yeah. I also liked kind of the little, I don't know if you would call them Easter eggs with her, but like for instance the mice in the pumpkin where she saves them from the cannon and stuff like that, and all like the little scenes where she's saving the animals. Like, I don't know, it's adorable and kind of funny. And
and they were good, and they showed kind of her personality, like when she was saving the turtle and then she lifted the bush and then the turtle was like going really slowly and she's like, oh right, and like gently pushes him in. Those were all really, really well done as well. I definitely agree there.
Mm-hmm. I also like the fact that they were like shooting vegetables at the other like
the two families were. Now that was one of the things that was obvious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they played that up a bunch, how it's just like, our homes are terrible, but dang, we have so much food. And the other side was like, our homes are amazing, but dang, we have no food.
Yeah.
So I mean that was very predictable that would be part of their finding common ground, was kind of to help each other out there.
Yeah. Although it was kind of interesting how they also used that to kind of, like as kind of the initial spark that kind of separated the two.
That again, that was very impressive that they managed to go back and tie those together. You're absolutely right, because not only was it something that could help bring them together, but that was part of the reason why it separated them in the past, right? Because I can understand how you look at the situation and be like, how would you ever separate? You can see that the other side has something that you could use, right?
Yeah.
But they really did a good job of being like, well, this is why the differences, even though they might help, could also drive people apart.
Yeah. And that's why communication's key.
Well, it's also why just not being a jerk is key,
yeah.
right? Like both of those cults, like years ago, both of them were just jerks who were getting revenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not a good thing.
Yeah.
So you had an issue with Twilight.
I did have an issue with Twilight. Yeah. I did not like her personality or her character in this.
I'm a bit confused on that, because I don't think that she was out of character.
Yeah, I don't know. See, I kind of like, I think this whole like Princess of Friendship thing may be going to her head a bit, especially like because in this episode, she was like very adamant that because she was the Princess of Friendship, she could find a problem or the solution to the problem. And I think she kind of like put Fluttershy down, not like intentionally or anything like that, but just like in her head that like, oh yeah, Fluttershy's here, but not really helping me. Like, I'm gonna find this solution to this problem. And
that's interesting, because I don't feel like I saw it from another perspective. I mean, I agree that it's kind of going to her head, but in from the way that I look at it is, it was this incredible pressure that she has to perform, right? You know, her friends, the two pairs of friends that have gone before have gone and solved it, and she's the Princess of Friendship by title, so if she couldn't solve it, then she would be, you know, a failure.
Yeah.
And this is kind of something that we've seen from Twilight in the past before, right? She doesn't like to be late. She doesn't like to fail things, right? She's an academic who wants to perfect everything, right? So I can see where you're coming from, how like the result of that causes her to kind of take the lead and put Fluttershy aside. But, you know, I think that when it comes, I don't think she's being arrogant about it. I think she's just expressing or trying to fix this huge amount of pressure that she faces as this kind of figurehead for friendship.
Yeah. Well, and like I've said before, like I enjoy when Twilight kind of goes a little crazy or insane or like controlling, like in this episode.
Yeah.
But I like to see some sort of resolution to that where she kind of learns something from it. And I don't think that happened in this episode, because it's
but I'm just curious as to what you think. Like don't get me wrong. Like I understand that. But I feel like she didn't actively push Fluttershy aside.
No.
Like she spent some time listening to her, and so I'm curious, like, what would Twilight have learned in this episode? Like, what lesson did she have to learn in this episode?
Well, I mean, I guess the thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is, like, at the very end of the episode, she was like, oh, we did it, like, and it was, you know, Fluttershy did it. Like, she couldn't acknowledge that, like, what she tried didn't actually work. but it was Fluttershy that kind of solved the friendship issue. I don't know. It was kind of odd to me.
Well, I can see kind of where you're coming from there. Where you're saying like in the end, the big majority of it was Fluttershy, but I wouldn't go as far to say that it was all Fluttershy. I think there was, and part of it I could understand too was like it can be a bit tiring to see Twilight kind of stick to her plans, right?
Yeah.
Where she's like, I've got these plans and they're gonna work, and then she like rips them out when it doesn't work, and she's just going through the list, as opposed to, in these situations, something that she kind of did wrong was you can't always approach things academically, right? You have to take in the context and the surrounding, which is what Fluttershy did, in order to solve the problem, whereas she was just going through the list.
Which also would have been a good thing for her to kind of learn, or at least like acknowledge in the very end. And I can't remember if she did acknowledge that fact or not, because it's been a whole day since I've seen the episode. But yeah, I don't know.
I think the thing is with the map episodes is that they're really light on the actual characters going to solve the problem.
Yeah. It's more about the location and the whole
and the people that they're trying to help too. Yeah. So when it comes to the lessons, they put a heavy emphasis on the other characters, right? Whether or not it be like Coco Pamel or like the two families here, or whatever the heck Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash did again. I don't even remember.
With Gilda.
Yeah, there you go. And so, I think it kind of might. It's more complicated to embed a lesson for the main characters themselves on top of the main lesson. That being said, I thought that as usual, when it comes to certain things that I've seen in my real, like this is a situation where I've seen stuff like this in my real life, right? Like people who are stubborn and won't admit that they're wrong and whatever. I always get the feeling that these things are solved way too easily.
Yeah.
Because in my personal experience, a lot of the times I've seen these situations and they're never resolved this easily. People like barely ever actually see the light,
Yeah.
Without some time and some really big things happening. So I guess my only issue is that when I see a conflict like this where both sides are stubborn and will not see the other person's point of view, I just don't see a realistic way in 20 minutes to properly have an event happen where they both see each other's side after fighting for so long.
Yeah.
But I feel like I kind of have to put that aside because it is a show, right? So like you can't expect them to put in like 10 episodes worth just to solve one conflict.
Let's do a mini series.
Yeah. So yeah. I guess all I'm saying is that like the Twilight and Fluttershy being kind of the background when it comes to lessons being learned, I think that's a similar type of limitation that the show has to do in order to properly try and convey the main message in a clear way.
Yeah. I think too it may have something to do with the fact that like last week's episode I wasn't a big fan of Twilight either in it.
Right, so it kind of carries over, for sure.
Because it seems to me that like this past couple of episodes, it's like, I don't know if it's like the writers are kind of going for something where like Twilight's perfect and can't learn a lesson because she doesn't have to learn a lesson or something like that. But I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking about.
Well, I think that's more of a timing thing, right?
Yeah,
like
I think so.
We had like last week's episode, she was supposed to learn a lesson, and then they just messed it up royally, right? I don't think they're giving off the vibe that she's perfect or anything like that. I think they're doing the opposite. I think that they're presenting it like, look, she's the princess of friendship, and she's still making mistakes.
Yeah.
Like we're all like she's just. I was gonna say human, but
she's only a pony.
Yeah. So I think that comes from the context of watching last week's episode, which wasn't very good, and then seeing this one back to back, where she wasn't supposed to, like, where she could have learned a lesson but didn't because of the circumstances that we just talked about.
Right. Yeah.
So I think a lot of it could be bad timing, but I liked a lot of this episode with Twilight. Like I thought the beginning with her was really cute, and I've always liked how excited she's been to go out. You know, when she couldn't go with Applejack and Rarity, she was so disappointed. And so now she was super, super excited, and that was really cute. You know, I liked, you know, I do like kind of her methodical stuff, even if it's kind of like roll your eyes. Like, obviously that's not going to work, Twilight. Like, it's still, like, I still think that's very cute of her. And her thing with books at the beginning was very cute. And what I've seen from a lot of reviews of the episode was that the aside from the Twilight kind of not acknowledging Fluttershy as much as she could have at the end, the dynamic between the two is actually kind of good. It's a dynamic where one of them takes the lead and the other one kind of doesn't, but that's kind of both what they're happy with. And so it's a very, it's not a parallel friendship where they both kind of have the same, in like they both put in and get out the same thing. But it's a very complimentary one, and I really like to see that one. And you could see it in this episode as well. Yes, Twilight was taking the lead. Yes, Twilight was kind of charging ahead, but I think that Fluttershy appreciates that. I think if Fluttershy was put into a position where she had to take the lead, she wouldn't want to do it. So
I did enjoy one other part, which is when like they first kind of got introduced to, was it the McColts? And they
the tiny little guy?
Yeah, the tiny little guy. And they noticed that she was an alicorn, and that they said like there's only 3 alicorns princesses in the world and whatever. So it's like, it's kind of showing that, like, you know, maybe the message that Twilight got coronated as a princess like hasn't reached these far lands yet. And it's
right.
Kind of shows how large the world is.
Yeah, and in a certain way, it's world building as well, right? You're reinforcing information that isn't relevant to the episode in order to serve a greater purpose. Which is to build the world and to build the storyline behind the world. And I think in the past, people's complaints have been that they haven't done enough of that. And so I feel like that particular interaction was a huge shout out and kind of like a step towards trying to do that more. Which I definitely appreciated as well.
This whole season too has been kind of like that, because they're using the map to kind of branch out and go to different locations and like build up the world a bit, which is cool.
Yeah. And apparently people have looked and this location had been on the map before, like named.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So it's been it was kind of like not foreshadowing, but they've been wanting to come to this place for a while now.
Cool.
So yeah. So I mean, overall, like I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think part of it was just because we watched last week's episode and it was so atrocious for so many reasons, especially around Twilight. I can see where you're coming from, but I think I kind of came into it with a fresh mind, with a fresh perspective. I was optimistic about them kind of not doing what they did last week, and I think from that perspective, it was, you know, it wasn't an episode I'm going to come back and watch all the time. It wasn't a favorite episode of mine. There were flaws here and there, but overall, I think we're back on track. We're back to the old, like, oh, that was nice kind of episodes, which I'm glad, because God, last week's was not that way.
Yeah, and I guess like just kind of talking with you about it, like, does kind of ease up my qualms with the episode a little bit. I still like it's still not, you know, a favorite of mine, and I still am not too fond of a lot of Twilight's actions in the end, but like, I can definitely see like where you're coming from. And
well, and that might also be a personality thing as well. Like, we all connect to different characters in different ways. Fluttershy has never really been a favorite character of mine, whereas Twilight's been one of my favorites all along. So, like that can play into these things as well. I know a lot of people get tired of Rainbow Dash's antics, but I think that, you know, I enjoy them, and that's just kind of a preference thing. So she was very hardcore Twilight in this episode. So for someone like me who enjoys that, you know, it was cool. But I can understand how for someone who isn't quite as into that, that they might not. So that's understandable. It's totally understandable.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're gonna wrap it up here because we're kind of running up on time.
Dang, we're good at timing.
I know. But thank you guys for watching this Spoilercast. I hope that you enjoyed it, and join us next week for another episode of Cutie Art Crusaders, and hopefully another Spoilercast.
The last episode before the season finale.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Like, This Spoilercast we kind of threw together at the last minute. We had it planned out, and then things fell through. But anyhow, so who knows about next week? But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. My name is FlutterGuy317.
I'm Rainbow Plasma.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye!
Bye!